Good evening. Welcome to Mandan Park District Board meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. Today is May 13th, 2024 at 5:30. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
None.
Public communication from visitors. We have a couple people in the audience, but I do believe they're going to talk about one of the items on the agenda. Anybody else here speaking from the community? Okay, I'll close that portion of the meeting. We'll go to the minutes. Looking for approval of the April 8th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approval of the April 8th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
Motion by Commissioner Freilich.
I can second that.
Second by Commissioner Melhoff. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, moving on to item number 1. Consider for approval the following bids. We have, looks like a couple playground equipment. Are you going to show renderings, or are you going to, not, okay. So we have Legion Park and Rough Rider Park. Dustin.
I believe when this is done, we'll have renderings online to take a look at. So before you is we had presentation of two vendors that presented the proposals for playgrounds for Legion Park and Rough Rider Park. So we'll start with Legion Park. We had 3 submissions, one from one vendor and 2 from another vendor. This park, little background, is the playground we're looking at is geared up towards a 2 to 5 year old playground. We gave equipment that are features that we're looking for, and required features, and then also desired features. So we got the proposals back, had a rating system. As far as the qualifications by both vendors and services provided, they both were very close to tied on both Rough Rider and Legion Park. So it really came down to design and features that they presented. So 2 of my facility supervisors, Commissioner Mutter and myself, did the evaluations for Legion Park, and we decided on option 2 from Grundall Playgrounds. They had more options. I guess better appeal, would be some of it. Commissioner Mutter, anything you want to add on that?
One of the Grundall project that I really liked in the playground was a handicap slide. It's probably a pretty new type of thing where we're going to give Dustin a little credit here. He's going to put some sidewalks so a wheelchair can come up to that slide, and they can go up and they can slide down for it, and it's made for kids who are in wheelchairs and stuff. So that's really caught my attention on that. And then also there's some kid benches that I really liked that Grundall made. So that's one of the things. We did change a couple things due to the fact that Head Start is down there, and so they use a lot of the equipment. So we brought in a couple musical type of things for them too. So.
Yep. And one other thing that they presented in this option was a adult toddler shared swing. We don't have one of this design in any of our playgrounds, so that's one of the things that we really liked on that one also. So the original bid for Legion Park came in at $99,000. They had up to $110,000 to spend with the addition or the additional equipment. Came to $103,478 for Legion Park. And the Rough Rider Playground, again, we had 1 submission from Dakota Playground and 2 submissions from Grundall Recreation. We had a group from Rough Rider Park make the decision, evaluate it, make the decision. Had a group of parents that came to, we were going to hold it at Rough Rider Park. The weather wasn't the greatest that night, so we moved it to Eagles Park. Had 4 or 5 different parents from the neighborhood come and take a look at this, and they agreed on Grundall option number 2 also, with a couple changes that didn't offset the price. So the price for that one there was $70,000 for that playground equipment there also. Any questions?
Any questions for Dustin? Dustin or Cole, there was a grant to help pay for part of Legion Park. Is that
right?
Right?
Yep. So the improvements, the playground, the improvements on the warming house, and then the additional or the ADA sidewalk leading from the parking lot to the park or the playground will be paid for in part through a land and water grant through North Dakota Park Service.
Dustin, can you do me one more favor? And I think you're doing it, but Rough Rider Park, can you explain what's going around the playground equipment so they understand?
Yeah,
Also?
so we'll have a concrete border, and then we'll try and get a sidewalk leading from the street. There's no pedestrian sidewalk at Rough Rider Park, but we will try and get a sidewalk from the street leading to the playground, get a curb cut, so that we can get strollers or wheelchairs over to that. Not included in this bid was a swing set. We have a swing set in storage, a brand new one, that we will place out there also.
Anything else for Dustin? Okay, board's wishes.
I'll make the approval of the Grondal Recreation to provide the playgrounds and the installation for Legion Park for the price of $103,478, with a portion of the Legion Park playground to be paid for the North Dakota Land and Water Grant, and Rough Rider Park for the price of $70,000.
Motion by Commissioner Mutter,
Second.
second by Commissioner Scott. Any further discussion? Okay, Commissioner Mutter,
Aye.
Commissioner Freilich,
Aye.
Commissioner Melhoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott.
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Motion carries.
Thank you, and you can look forward to this. Delivery date is middle to end of August on that.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 2, consider for approval to advertise bids for proposed boat ramp.
So President Meshke and Commissioners, it's kind of a step that we're at here today in the boat ramp is, as you know, we had our public hearing to make sure we heard all the neighbor residents got their fulfillment as far as requests and needs. Jesse Kist is with us here from A2S to hopefully show you the design. We are at about 90% design phase right now. We did have a meeting last Thursday with all of the city and county representatives. We did invite DOT and Game and Fish. They weren't able to attend. We did email that information off to those state agencies to be able to provide any additional feedback if they would like to share that. At this point, we have not received anything. As a reminder, with this project, as you know, $800,000 grant that we received from the Sovereign's Land Grant from the state has to be spent by May of 25. I did reach out to the grant administrator to determine if for some reason we had a timeline or a delivery of materials or severe weather, would we be able to get an extension on that? That conversation was had. We will cross that bridge, as I was told, when it happens, to see if we need it. It sounds like it's a budget transfer for the state to be able to move those grant funds from 25 into 26 because they go July 1. So we're just making those discussions. So before you today, obviously there's a few things related to the permit that I'll let Jesse kind of share on and where we're at with that. That's the biggest question here today for the board is, are you comfortable bidding this, knowing that we may or may not have all the permits in place, but we will put language into the bid document stating that if we don't have all permits, construction will not start. But we don't want to lose time, is an essence basically here, as we've talked about, hoping to get some of the work done this fall if everything lines up in a perfect world. We did get some good notification from the State Water Commission about some permitting. So with that, I will turn it over to Jesse, and you kind of can update him.
Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks. So so what I see on this, oh, there we go. Okay. And you all have this in front of you, is that right? So I'll just sort of give a high level overview of the site, and as Cole led into, I'll talk briefly about permits, and I'll let you ask any questions you might have. So the overall site layout is very similar to what we talked about. When was that meeting? Last spring? Yeah, no. Was it that long? Fall. Yeah, last fall. Layout is generally the same. Certain things have changed. This sort of 90% design has 43 trailer stalls, 2 of them being ADA compliant, and then we have 24 standard stalls with 1 ADA compliant stall. I think that's pretty close on the trailer stalls to what you saw before. We've expanded the standard stalls. I think maybe there's around a dozen at that time. Now we're at 24. And that's largely due to some of the changes in the site or reassessing it after the trees were removed and looking at the space we had to work with, really the flat ground that we had to work with. And so just making the most of what we had. Generally, the ramp orientation is the same. The yellow that you see is the concrete ramp extending all the way up, and then, as we talked about before, the surface in the parking lot is a permeable paver, essentially a hard plastic paver with a stone base and stones mixed in the paver voids. So touching on the permits, the 408 permit was the largest permit that we sort of anticipated, potentially needed. We've been working with the Corps out of Omaha on that permit. Ultimately, we received good news from them that they were willing to consider the project adjacent to their federal revetment, which is really just riprap that was installed by the Corps of Engineers. So that's the yellow line that you see on the figure. So they are considering our project adjacent to their structure or maintenance. So the purple shading around, really the purple shading everywhere on the figure is riprap, but you can see that some of that overlaps that federal revetment. So the Corps of Engineers willing to consider it maintenance as long as we could get concurrence from the local sponsor, which is the state engineer, State Water Commission. We've been working through that process. Recently received that letter of support from them, and so that will allow us to proceed with the overall permitting process, with the big remaining permit being what's called the 404 permit, essentially dealing with impacts to waters of the U.S. and wetlands. So we anticipate that to be maybe a 60 to 90 day turnaround on this project. We've been working with the Corps of Engineers out of Bismarck on that. They're very aware of the project, continue to correspond with them on it. They just haven't been able to start processing it pending that letter out of Omaha on the 408 permit. So we're comfortable that we'll have the permits in hand late summer, probably late summer. I'm hoping it's not early fall, but late summer to early fall. So the idea with advertising this pending those permits is to hopefully get it on somebody's calendar with the understanding that it is pending the permits, and given that deadline of May 25 for the funding, if we're going to hit that, we don't want to constrict this project to only one spring, uncertainties with water level and things like that. So, any questions?
Do you think the not having the permits or them being approved is going to maybe deter some people from bidding this out? Is that normal?
So with the permits that we have pending, sort of the nature of them relative to this project, I'm really not very concerned about it. I'll certainly make efforts to emphasize that to contractors, maybe explain it at a pre-bid meeting.
Okay.
It would be better if we had them in hand, but weighing a project bid date sort of in late summer, early fall, where that doesn't give contractors much of any time to bid it and get materials and everything sourced for a fall project, I think I weighed it out as more beneficial to bid without those, but certainly it would be better if we did have them.
So Cole, they didn't say no, it wasn't a hard and fast. I guess that's kind of my concern is that we get one bid and they didn't say for sure that May 2025 we have. Said we would. Maybe was that the?
Well,
answer?
I think the intent was obviously to have these funds spent within their budget fiscal year, and so there is going to be an extension. There are the Bismarck River project improvement along the Missouri is also part of that, and we know where they're kind of at too. So I really see there will be some requests if we can't meet our deadline. I think the goal would be for us to hopefully get the ramp itself in this fall when the water levels are low, get that concrete pushed in, and then maybe we can get the parking lot and the other amenities, meaning lighting and some of those things, that are going to be added in the spring of 25, which gives us all of April and May. We may have majority of that local match already spent by then. It'd be close.
So that we can't spend the 800. We can't spend that money on anything but the ramp. Is that right? Or can we put that towards the lot and the lights? And can we spend that before we put the ramp in, do you think? If we did it
Yes,
kind
so-
of backwards?
President Meskey, originally, yes, the answer to your question is yes. Originally, that was the first thought, was that they had limited the covenants associated with the grant to everything below, I guess I'll use it, the water line or
Yeah,
sovereign line.
below ordinary high.
And then we had requested that that be amended, and they did amend that grant language. So that was the original, is that everything below the sovereign line that we could use the grant money for, well, we weren't going to utilize it all. So then they amended that and allowed us to use it for the entire space and area.
And then when you anticipate bidding, Cole, you talked about lighting. We talked about a fish cleaning station. We throw alternate bids in there for some of those things, or is that are those more afterthoughts as we go forward?
Yeah, so, and Cole, jump in if I say something wrong. The plan at this point is to bid really the construction project, the earthwork, paving, riprapping, everything to do with just the site preparation, or really the final site, with it only including the dock features. We talked previously about, right, a fish cleaning station, pedestrian bridge, things like that. Those plan was essentially wait and see where the project budget ends up with all that, but it doesn't, this will include lighting, security lighting on the site.
Yes. So President Meskey and Commissioners, in the base bid is security lighting. We had a gate in the entrance so that during the winter months we can put a gate there to keep activities taking place in there, since it is not a asphalt or concrete parking lot. As he mentioned, the dock, we also are looking at a kayak. So we're going to have an allowance. We haven't really narrowed that down yet, but we're thinking right around $250,000 or $200,000 allowance for those unforeseen things. We can alternate bid some of those items in addition to see where they may come in at. But the fish cleaning station, we have been working with Tim Nielsen with Morton County Parks. He thinks he has a connection where the Bismarck Reel and Rec might be interested in helping participate in this project. But we're trying to meet all the needs of the citizens in that neighborhood to the north. So we did meet with the city and the county last Thursday, as I mentioned, about a street sign, and we found out there is one there already about a not a through street, that we would have a sign that Kelly has done with all of our park facilities. We'll have a sign there that says Mandan Boat Ramp at Car Bodies is what we're thinking of for the name. And then as far as the hours and rules and things of that nature, safety features, as we mentioned, lighting will be on the, as I refer to it, as the entrance and the ramp. We'll have two kind of towards each other to prevent any type of inappropriate activities, I guess, as we know is taking place down there today. And then we were talking about adding some bollards and some additional concrete in there and some parking
Wheel stops.
wheel stops, sorry, on that end. We're hoping that we can potentially get a ramp, or excuse me, a bridge that connects the north and south side of the properties. We did get an estimate, I think roughly that estimate is right around 80 grand. We were working with the state and along with the city about potentially getting some type of remnant of the Memorial Bridge and trying to take pieces of that. Whole lot of mitigation to be able to get some of that pieces. But I think it'd be a cool bridge to be able to connect the two and preserve some history. We did reach out to BNSF on that. It's an opportunity just to say that we did those preliminary discussions. But from a cost standpoint, we're probably going to just have some kind of a natural wood-looking bridge if we can afford it after we open the base bids.
Any other questions?
Cole's talked to me twice about this, so I want to make sure so if we recommend of approval of the construction without the permits, we have no problems, right? I'm just going to make sure we're okay. That's all I'm saying.
So the ask tonight would be approval to advertise for bids, and it would come back to you again for awarding of the project. Right.
So President Meskey and Commissioner Mutter, so ideally we could do a couple options. Obviously, there'll have to be language in there that this project will not move forward unless, obviously, step one would be board approval. Step two, that all permits are in place. In a perfect timeline, I know Jesse's going to talk about the timeline here in a minute. We're not going to advertise it tomorrow, so we're probably going to wait that 2 to 3 weeks because we only meet once a month. We wanted to at least get it approved tonight to advertise, push it down to that third week of, get to that end of May, or excuse me, the first week in June, the week before our normal board meeting. And then we'd have 21 days from there, and we probably wouldn't be bringing it back to the board until July's board meeting, which I think is July 8th. Now, there's a couple of things that this board could do if you wish, is maybe we could put a 60-day hold that we can hold bids for 60 days before we approve, which then buys us time into August to approve the bids. We've done that in the past. Sometimes bidders don't like to hold, or excuse me, a contractor doesn't like to have bids held for 60 days, but I think with COVID and things in the past, that's kind of minimized what we have going on here, where maybe construction costs and their bids might go up or down a little bit. But that is one option, that we could hold bids for 60 days. I think we're only looking at 30 for now. But if we hold them for 60 days, at least it gives us another 30 days to hopefully have some permitting in place, come back in August, and then approve. And then that would be, does it have enough time for the contractor to order his materials and get everything in by fall?
By holding it longer, it might deter more people too, I would think. So maybe not.
The good thing on this project is not any infrastructure, underground utilities, or having to go in or up, not building a structure. We're going to pour the concrete ramp, and we can probably forward to that video how they build it. It's kind of interesting how they push it in with basically a dozer. So if that can get poured this fall and push that in, and they get all the site work and prepped and some of that, maybe the utilities, which again, 2 light poles will be minimal for us as far as utilities being trenched in. I don't see why this project can't roll if we have our permitting in place to be done by this fall. But again, it's a very aggressive timeline. Everything's got to line up, but it's really not a very difficult project in my mind.
Okay. Questions or concerns? How do we want to proceed?
Can I ask the board what their thoughts are on the 60 days versus 30 days?
Personally, I don't know if I feel there's any need for either, because we're going to put a stipulation in there that it will not proceed until we have the permits. So I think if they're made, Jesse said he would make them aware in the pre-bid, and I think if they know ahead of time that there's no moving forward with the project until the proper permits are obtained, I just don't know why we put that wording in there and maybe scare some people off.
Maybe I'll add to that. So the 30 days that Cole referred to is really more a result of just plotting everything out and when we would have an opening and looping it to when your next meeting would be to award, which ended up being just shy of a month potentially. So it wasn't necessarily a hard and fast 30 days. It's just kind of how it laid out. You could conceivably also call a special meeting and award it earlier,
Right.
Later, right? So
I'll recommend approval to advertise the boat ramp contingent to the construction will not start until permits are secured and approved.
Motion by Commissioner Mutter,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Freilich. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
thank you.
Jesse. All right, moving along to item number 3. Update from Burry and Associates on notice of approval of section, my glasses here, 408 and 404 permits of Heart River Irrigation System Phase 2. Welcome, Steve.
All right, as we're adding the new PowerPoint here, we've been talking about Corps of Engineers and all the history and things, and hopefully the timeline that we had, unfortunately, with this project as far as getting approvals and permitting will not be similar. As you would know, this project, Phase 1, has been completed, and Dustin will share some figures with that with you later. This project started in 2021, doing the iron study, and then really just kind of kicked into some of our water issues that we were having at the softball fields as far as our wells and things. So with that, I wanted to mention we did do an improvement district. If you remember, we had to advertise for a GO bond. We were going to pay for this with a 1 mil increase. We did the advertisement. We had the public hearing. Obviously, we didn't have any opposed to that. We decided to proceed with the project, which phase one we ended up paying cash for, so we did not execute any type of geo bonding with this. It is still open if we choose to move forward with the project. We have that ability to do that, which then would require us to dedicate a mill for that project. I did reach out to our attorney on regarding the bonding, just asking the question in regards to if we don't do anything moving forward, do we have to do anything in addition to cancel any of what's been started? The answer was no. So just so you understand from that geo improvement district, again, park districts can levy an improvement district back to the park district for this improvement. And the only way it would be executed is if we chose to go sell bonds and then bring those bonds back to the park board to approve and then get our financing in place. So that has not happened. So depending any discussion and direction here tonight, that would be the next step if we choose to go that way. So with that, Steve Buren.
Thank you, Cole. My name is Steve Burrian with Burrian Associates and President Meshke and members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As Cole mentioned, way back in 2021, it was recognized that you were having consistent problems with staining, where the iron in your groundwater, when you pumped it out of the ground, would get oxidized, and your concrete was turning orange, and your fences were turning orange, and all of your amenities were turning orange. And I had done some work in the past conditioning water to potentially solve that problem. We did a study, messed around with it a little bit. I think we probably could have solved it, but at the same time, you were having lots of problems with your wells. That aquifer isn't real consistent for you, and you had to put new wells in. You drilled multiple wells in different locations and they were dry, and so you started noodling on what you could potentially do as alternate water supply options. And we looked at the Missouri River, and it just was, even though that's the robust one, it was pretty difficult to get over to where we needed it. And so the two things that we landed on were using city water and the associated costs of that, but lower capital costs, or putting in a Heart River intake. And we ironically came up with this approach where we did a hybrid, where we could do either one of those. It was very easy to move forward with the city connection, so we did that as part of phase one, and I'll show you more details in a minute. We too had to get a section 404 and a section 408 permit from the Corps. Unlike what Jesse was talking about, ours having to cross under a certified levee became more complicated. At first, they kind of yo-yoed around with us and thinking that we were going to have to pay for it. Then they found some funding, but then they got to the end of their fiscal year and ran out of time. And so Cole, was a pretty high energy dude. And so as I worked with him, you can imagine how frustrating that was for him as we went through all those delays. But the long and short of it is we do have our section 404 and 408 permit. I'm not sure that means we want to move forward with the project, but I'll give you an overview of things and we can discuss things at the end of the presentation. Then I only have a dozen slides or so. This just shows This just shows the project that we were anticipating. So you can see the orange line on the map. That's actually the city water main that was the closest to us. And then on the south side of that ball diamond where the city water main ends, that's where we put the vault in. And that vault is able to have a city water line coming into it and then to go out and enter those new or those green irrigation lines that are out there. And then we also made the vault ready so that we could just tap in another line coming from the Heart River. And so if you go over to the Heart River itself, then the plan was to put a screen in the river. We would drill a pipeline underneath the certified levee, and then we would have a caisson on the dry side of the levee or a concrete cylinder where that pipe would terminate. And then on top of that, we'd have a pump station, and then we'd pump from that pump station through that blue transmission line, and we'd pick up the majority of the different irrigation needs for the Parks and Rec District along the way. We would also have a tie on that so that if we had to go back to the golf course at some point in the future, we could do that. So it was a pretty significant project, pretty well thought out in terms of giving you just lots of options. Even though you pay a higher operating cost for the municipal water supply, we felt that having it long-term made sense because there may be a case where the Heart River goes dry in an extreme drought, and so this gave you kind of the best of both worlds. In 2021, then at the end of the year, we started moving forward with finalizing the project, and so this just blows up that aspect of it, and that vault is in place. that connection to the city infrastructure is in place, and you've successfully used that water ever since. As Cole indicated, you really haven't had a normal year yet, and so as we go to try to guesstimate how much money we're going to spend each year, we have a range, and it's relatively narrow, but we can't say with confidence exactly what that'll cost. And then we do anticipate that if you ever got one of those years where it was just bone dry in April, that you could, see those costs increase quite significantly, but that shouldn't be the average. This just shows you some of the acres that you were anticipating that you may irrigate, not showing the golf course. So just a variety of the old converted Ferris field, as well as some of the different softball and baseball diamonds that you have in that area. That was the overall master plan for the irrigation.
So Steve and the board, just a quick question here. So when we applied for our 2 permits, the coverage that we can irrigate, so there's no concerns if we ever wanted to add in municipal golf course to irrigate if we want, because that was one of the things we didn't want to have to amend a permit. So we can cover all of our Ferris field of baseball and the golf course if we choose to.
We needed a bigger line.
Yeah, we have a 12-inch line to accommodate all of that. And the Corps' concern was making sure we protected the integrity of the levee and then any potential environmental impacts as we worked around and in the river. And so once we get out of that ordinary high water mark, the rest of that wasn't something. I've worked with projects where they were looking at cumulative depletions of water or something along those lines, but in this case, none of that came to fruition. And so this is a pretty straightforward project once we get beyond the levee and the river. Good point, Cole. This just shows the project, and it's just lines on a map, but it's somewhat hard to describe. But if you look on the profile, you can see the caisson, which is the vertical part on the bottom of the map. And what we would actually do on this project is you'd put the caisson in first, and then you'd put a weaker spot within the caisson, and then you'd actually set up a drill rig back in the park, back where you can see it angling back up, and that drill rig would be on the surface. And then you'd actually horizontally, directionally drill right through the caisson, and then take that out underneath the levee, and then take that into the river, and then it would daylight in the river, and then we'd put a screen structure on the top of that, most likely with a diver. So that would all be done in the wet to prevent us from having to put like a big cofferdam in or something that would be more obtrusive to the environment. I've done a couple projects like this over my career. They were much larger than this one, the ones that I've done, but that we've done them quite successfully. You don't have a ton of bidders, and so depending on how busy they are, it can be quite risky when it comes to bid pricing. But in terms of the construction and looking at the Corps, working with them, the big concern was that we were low enough so that we would stay out of the parts of the levee that could be damaged. And I think they had 13 different technical people working on reviews for all of this. And so it did take a long time. And we actually got an interim letter that many months ago that said we were done. And we called them back and said, I thought you had 5 more to do. And they said, oh yeah, we do have that. And so it was a cumbersome process, but they were very cooperative. They liked what they saw. They did ask quite a few questions, but as we answered them all we really got was a series of items that we have to meet as part of the final permit, and none of those do I think are unreasonable. They would just be things that the contractor would have to verify and that we'd have to include in the design. If you look then at where we stand today, we have the final design about 95% complete. And so if you were to move forward with the project, we would need to address any comments from the USAA Corps of Engineers and then prepare the final front-end bidding documents and go to bid, much like the process that Jesse was describing earlier. There are a few other permits we need, but none of those are as near as difficult to get. There's a state water appropriations permit that is, we understand, has been generally approved and then placed in a queue waiting for finalization of the project. We would need a state sovereign land permit because we're working within a navigable water body. I mentioned that we got this 408 and the 404 permit, and there's some things we'd have to submit with that, such as an operations manual and the drilling specs and some of those types of things. They do require more construction observation that we typically would do on a Parks and Rec project, so that'll drive up the construction observation costs a bit if you move forward. And then if you build the full transmission line, we have to cross a DOT highway, and so we'll need a permit for that as well. In terms of future work then, if you were to move forward, we'd need to wrap up those permits, we'd need to finalize the bidding documents, update the cost estimate, but I do have a indexed update for you to consider tonight. We work through bidding and discussion, negotiation, we do the construction, and then the Corps does have some pretty laborious post-construction type work we need to do for documentation in terms of more aggressive as-built and certifications and things when we got done with the project. This shows the timeline that we were on, and so you could see, had we gotten a timely review from the Corps, and they cautioned us that they may not be able to do that, and we cautioned you, you can see that the black bars are what we were hoping to do, and maybe had a project as early as 2022. You can see that they used the entire window for review, and then if we go into the next budget, if we were to look at, or the next schedule, how we could potentially move forward, this shows some of the additional review time that it took, and then shows that if we were to move forward with the project, the permit has a 2-year window, and then you can get an extension for 1 year. In the times I've worked with those are pretty automatic, that first extension. If you need another one, then you're kind of in the begging process, and so like Cole talked about earlier, those are a little bit more leery of whether you're going to get them. This would be if you were to start right away. I know that's not Cole's intentions with your budget, but this shows you that you could potentially get close to that 2-year timeline if you were to move forward right away. If not, you'd need to exercise that 1-year extension then. The issue that probably comes
From what date? When does that start then, when you say
we got
2-year
notice
extension from
April
what date?
9th
April. Okay.
of 2024.
Sorry, thanks.
No, good question. So then the big question is, how much are we looking at in estimated costs? And the last time I presented to you, it didn't seem that long, but it was actually April of 2022 was the last time I was before you, before we worked through all the Corps review processes. So this is based on a detailed estimate that we did in 2022, and we've simply indexed the numbers forward based on construction indexing the last couple of years. And we did get whacked really hard in 2023 with those numbers, and so it wasn't quite as bad in 2024, but our best judgment today of what that would cost in 2024 dollars, and we may even need to index that forward a bit as we go to construct, would be around 1.55 million for completion of the project. In looking at this, you could probably go into quite a bit more detail of different operating costs for the Heart River project versus the city project, but if you do a real simplified payback analysis, and what Dustin has come up with is somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year for municipal water, depending on how dry it is, that is a 37-year payback, and even in the public sector, that's pretty extreme. And so as we sit here today, knowing what we know, it does appear like moving forward with the project as we originally recommended it might not be a super wise financial decision. However, you did also spend a considerable effort on the permit. And so as Cole and I were talking about this in preparation for the meeting, one of the things you could consider is just doing the permitted items as an interim project. If you wanted to have access to that, you could put the screen on it and you could have access to that wet well. If you simply wanted to get underneath the levee, you could skip the screen and cap it on the river end. You could cap the caisson on the dry side, and then you'd be all set, and all of that infrastructure is pretty straightforward. There's no moving parts, and so you shouldn't see a lot of aging of those assets over the years. And then if you decided to use it for the golf course, or you decided to use it as originally intended sometime in the future, whether it was funding or another driver that prompted you to do that, you could certainly do that. And so what we did there is we just took that construction cost that we had of 1.186. So that's the construction component of that 1.556. And we looked at just the things you'd have to do, and that would be the general mob, it would be the HGD drilling under the levee, it would be the wet well caisson, and then the intake in the river. And if we add that up along with contingencies and engineering, that would essentially cut the project costs about in half in terms of looking at things a little better than half. And so it's still a real investment, but that would be something that you could consider if you wanted to take advantage of your permit. In closing then, we did successfully complete that phase one project. You don't have a lot of money invested in that. The extra components of the pit for you to access the water from the Heart River, and so you could move forward simply with a municipal supply for the long term. It's going to be very good water. Obviously, it's somewhat costly, and it's probably going to get more costly over time, but it does a good job of irrigating everything that you need. As I noted, the full project right now doesn't appear to have the great payback. You could consider taking advantage of the permit, and if you do that, then we would wrap up with just the USA permitted components instead of the entire project. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
So Steve, say we were to do the whole thing, phase two, do all of it. The return on our investment, yes, could take some time. Along with that, though, the pump, I'm assuming needs repaired, replaced. What is our maintenance in those 37 years on top of just the return on our water savings cost?
I'd probably be guessing a bit if I just answer that question specifically
figured
tonight,
you
but
would.
I can get back to you on, most of the things that you're doing here are just concrete and pipeline and stuff, but you're right that the controls and the pump components, I guess if we went up and looked at I don't know here in the estimate, the pump house and electrical is $283,000 of the whole, and much of that isn't the pumps, but you're right that over a certain number of years, part of that would have to be upgraded and part of that would have to be replaced, and then you're going to have the ongoing electrical costs for pumping and heating that pump house and that type of thing. So I can get you a rough estimate. I can get back to Cole on that.
Cool.
So President Meskey and Commissioners, we've had some discussions just very preliminary with Garrett, our golf operations manager, in regards to, we put that irrigation system in 2001. Life expectancy is 25 years. We know we've gotten 30 plus out of softball and some other ones. So wherever we're at in regards to having to replace that, if and when that happens, where would we probably want to draw some of that water would probably be this location. And then I know Representative from HDR here was tonight just to kind of fact finding on what we have going on, and there's been discussion with Lower Heart Water Resource District in regards to the levee and some improvements there. So there's a lot of moving parts that I just heard here before our meeting here tonight regarding Lower Heart. But if we are planning on anything in our strategic plan to replace Mandan Municipal Golf Course irrigation system, it's going to be longer than 3 years with that permit. So that would be the dilemma discussion that we can have at our July retreat, would be if we want to spend some of that infrastructure, I'll call it phase 2A, and put that in, knowing that if whatever's going to happen in the municipal, we'd have time, but at least all that would be in place. Because we probably won't replace the irrigation system, and that includes the pump house at Mandan Municipal, by the time this permit would have to be, or excuse me, the expiration date of this permit. We're probably 5 years out from Muni irrigation replacement.
And then I guess one question we've never discussed, but I'll ask it of the group, is that from a water quality standpoint, you'd have to verify this with Dustin and Garrett, but I would think that the raw water from the Heart River would actually be a little bit better from an irrigation standpoint. It would be warmer, and then it would have a few more of the things in it that the grass likes, but the humans don't. And so I think they're, on a relative basis, you'd probably see a little bit happier grass with the raw water than you would with the city water. But for all of you that have luxurious green lawns, you know that Mandan water works awfully well also.
So Dustin, your estimates come from just based upon what we've used so far, or, I mean, were you able, when we had, because all that used to be well, right?
Correct.
Did we have to keep track of the gallons that went through there and
We
compare that to what we would be using from the city?
It was difficult to keep track, but so what we did was we counted the amount of heads, and you can get different tips. So we used, calculated the tip size, gallons per minute, and we did this back in 2020 by estimating the 2020 costs. So North softball was about 24,000 gallons per day. South softball was 43,000. So added together on a 90-day cycle, those two on wells, or those two with city water in 2020 prices would have been $23,400. So what I did was take our 2022 meter reading, so that this the irrigation system with the city water came on at the very end of June in 2022, and it was a dry year, if you remember, in 2022. So we pumped it pretty hard in July and August, and it ended September. So what I did was I took those, and that cost was about $15,000. So I figured $7,500 per month. Added that, took 3 months, a 90-day cycle essentially, came up with $22,500 for 8 diamonds. So actual cost, essentially in 2022 would have been, to irrigate for a 90-day cycle, would have been $22,500. Our estimates in 2020 were $23,400. So you cost inflation, we were pretty close there. So if we take it, our 8 softball diamonds, our 2 youth baseball diamonds, because remember 2 are going to turf, and then our 2 Ferris field multi-purpose fields, we're looking at 2022 prices would be about $33,600 to irrigate, I would say, on a normal year, in a 90-day cycle. So that'll give us, our June, July, August, plus May on the front side and September on the back side. So I guess you take that times 20%. I don't know if 10% per year is realistic. 2024 should cost $40,000.
Was our original permit, was it like 45,000, 47? You said what we have into permits is pretty significant. Application fees.
We don't have any identically itemized out here, but as far as our total permitting,
I thought they waived one of those.
Talking about
I thought
cost
they,
from us for the amount of water you applied for.
the application for the permit, wasn't it? Wasn't the initial application like 45,000?
10,000 into.
$45,000 or
Yeah.
Application and permitting, I think we spent $8,000 this last time with the Corps, and we spent about $8,000 prior to that. So the permitting part of it was about $16,000.
Okay.
If you're talking, I was thinking you were asking about the amount of water that we requested from the Department of Water Resources.
Did they waive some application fees too?
They didn't charge us anything in the end.
Oh, okay.
At first, they were going to charge us to do the review as if they were like consultants, and then they found some internal resources to do
Okay.
that for us. But you talk about good, quick, and cheap or whatever, you can only have 2, and we didn't get quick.
That's why we're here today.
On the Lower Heart River, is there any plans or anything that's going to change on the Heart River? I mean, if we put a pump over there, I don't want to sound like things are going to change, but will that always be there, type of thing, or will the river change?
No, I think there's been talks about it being changed. Yeah.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Dennis Reap. I work with HDR Engineering. We're under contract with the Lower Heart Water Resource District to provide them services on their levee system, including the accreditation process. So could you just repeat your question, make sure I get it correct?
I just want to make sure that if we put a pump there, if we put a pump where we want to put it, there's going to be water there. 5-6 years from now, is it going to change? Or 20 years from now, is that going to change? Or the Heart I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking is there any plans on that Hart River being moved
Talk
or
about some, I think, widening it.
or
Wasn't that
widening
part-
it or
Right, okay.
anything?
Yeah, thank you. So right now, as the accreditation project sits, we do not plan to realign any part of the levee system in this reach. And so my expectation is that the river would stay in its current position and that the water would continue to flow in its current path. So you wouldn't have any issues for water access if that's what you're asking.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if you want me, can I share my other piece of information?
Oh, please do.
just a quick update on this particular reach of the levee system. We are negotiating or dealing with FEMA on a CLOMA, a conditional letter of map revision, and so they look at the hydraulics. This stretch of the levee system has recently been identified having freeboard deficiency, so we might be doing work in this reach. It does not intersect with the current location that is it's presented to you from Burrian and Associates. So, but there potentially will be work for the levee system in this same general area. If that.
Mr. President, I can maybe add a little bit more color to Mr. Mutter's question or Commissioner Mutter's question. When we looked at the hydrogeomorphology of the river, there are two things that we really have to have. One is there is a low head dam downstream of that, and it's not the fanciest low head dam that you're going to run across, but it does provide enough of a blockage that it provides a stable head back so that we have water above our permit or above our intake. Otherwise, we run a risk in low flows to not have water above it. The second thing is where we designed it. We're on there's a meander curve there, and if you follow rivers, that on the outside of the meander curve, it's eating away at the bank. On the inside, it's depositing. And so we were very careful to put the intake on the far side of the river where it's deeper. And then that is an armored stretch. So that's all rip-wrapped already. And so as Mother Nature tries to erode that they've already made the decision to armor that and prevent that. And there's a road right there. So that makes a lot of sense. And so you never know about Mother Nature, but for what we looked at, we should be in the deepest part of the river in an armored section. We avoided it the places where people like to swim and some of those kind of things. And then we do need that low head dam downstream to keep that consistent head on the intake.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? What, other than the cost of construction going up, what other disadvantages do we have by waiting, by tabling this?
President Meshke, I think the biggest risk you run is just the whole, permitting process. And, the Corps did not like the project out of the gate. When we met with them, we're getting into a river, we're going underneath the certified levee, and had, we not done it before in a couple different places where we could point to successes in doing it, it's just not something that they're real fond of. And so as a result, if you wait past the expiration date, you'd be starting over, and you could have a different group that had a different thought process as they went through it and put more restrictions, which would drive up the dollars. I think you'd always could get it done. I don't think it'd be impossible. But we were very successful when they asked us all these gotcha questions. We were very successful at going back and explaining how we thought ahead on that, and here's how we were going to mitigate that. The only thing we had to agree to is we had the pipe a little bit shallower, not underneath the levee, but as it entered the river, and they wanted us to deepen that a little bit. And in the scheme of things, that really didn't change the project, so we would likely go underneath the river a bit more and then daylight it later instead of the way we were going to do it originally. We do have valves on.
I guess what I mean by waiting, I don't mean by letting the permits expire. I don't mean that. I mean getting more information or waiting through the summer to see how things go.
Tonight?
Yeah.
My personal opinion would be, I guess, and Cole, you can back me on this, but I don't think you plan to put it into this year's budget anyway. And so I think to think about this and think I can get back to you on those operating costs and think about other questions you have. I think that, I don't think there's any rush tonight to make a hasty decision.
I know you talked about geo bonds, Cole. That doesn't expire either as far as access to them.
That is correct.
And right now you say that's at 6, is that today's number at 6%?
As far as interest rate, you're talking on the geo bonds?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the last time we had a shared conversation with them, yes.
And that could actually be an advantage, right? I mean, we all heard they were going down, and now I've heard they're going to
Yeah.
flatline again. But
Yeah.
we all got so used to 2%, right? That we were pretty spoiled. And I guess I remember the days where my parents were standing in line at gas stations, and it was 16 or 17%. But hopefully, we can go from 6 down to something a bit more reasonable. 4 versus 6 is a huge difference on a project like this.
You guys have been quiet over here.
Yeah, it's been a lot of good information for me because I wasn't even on the
Right.
board when you were here to present the last time. So it's great, and it's like drinking from a fire hose maybe a little bit, but it's good to hear it rather than just read it. So appreciate your time and your effort explaining it.
Well, if something comes up, you could work through Cole or Dustin, and we'll definitely get back to you. Otherwise, thank you for the opportunity to work with you so far.
Thanks, Steve. I guess I would look to just table this. Maybe have some discussion at our board retreat a little bit more to see how, get more feedback, I guess, from you, Dustin, probably. And, maybe, I know we asked Garrett the last time and he really didn't think we needed it for the golf course, but you're telling me maybe down the road this wouldn't be, if we're watering the whole golf course with it too, that makes a little bit of a difference for me. So, just a little bit. That's a little bit more water we're talking about. So, okay. Anything? Board, anything? You're all right with tabling this? Okay. All right. Moving on to item number 4. Consider for approval the following items. Bag policy for district facilities, FF&E items for All Seasons Arena, and consider for approval out-of-state travel for National Parks and Recreation Conference. Cole?
So President Meschke and Commissioners, the first item was just our bag policy for attendance into our facilities. As you've seen over the last, since 2015, the construction of the Starring Sports Complex, Memorial Ballpark. We now have the Rodeo Arena along with Dakota Speedway. We have some large venues that have large attendance, and so as part of our safety committee, we've always been looking at our policies and procedures. Some groups, like the Bismarck Mandan Stock Car Association, does have security along with other amenities that utilize that facility, but they do bag searches for that facility already. What we were concerned with from the safety committee and from a liability standpoint of the park district would be what happens if an unfortunately active threat or some incident were to occur. You're seeing them all over the United States. And so we had Dave Freer, facility manager, kind of research all of the large venues in the state of North Dakota, kind of get an idea of what they have for bag policies. Some are very strict where they got to be a certain dimensions, they got to be see-through. And then there's some who don't allow any at all. And then some venues had nothing as far as a bag policy. From the park district's liability standpoint, our concerns is we lease our space to the Stock Car Association, we lease to the Mandan Rodeo, we have a lot of high school events in our facilities. We as the park district really don't run any ticketed events. And so we were concerned that if an incident were to happen and the person that was leasing our facility had an active threat, whatever that may entail, whether it's a gun, bomb, the worst case scenario, where does that liability fall back on? Well, obviously there's a role of the person leasing the facility and the owner of the facility. So if we have a policy in place that will be, if it was approved tonight, at least the media and the liability side of it would say we have a policy in place. It's flexible enough that gives us the opportunity for those people leasing our facilities to decide how strict they may or may not want to be. We as the owner didn't want to say you have to do it this way and that way only. We didn't want to be that strict because we realize there's smaller events and larger events that we kind of take into place. We did meet with the school district. We did meet with all of the organizations that utilize our facilities, and they all were very supportive of it. We did share with Mandan Public Schools this policy. Mark Weiss, the athletic director, talked about with the new facility that they're opening with the new high school. Maybe this is something they would like to implement to have some consistency. I have not heard where their status may be at, but really the whole point of this is to have some type of policy in place for the park district to protect itself with all the people that we lease our facilities out at. So pretty simple. I'll just kind of touch on it. Just highly encourage all fans entering Park District facilities to limit the size of the bag that they are bringing to the facility. At any point, all bags are subject to search. Bags that we feel are not in compliance may be searched or may not be permitted into the facility. If patrons do not comply with this request, they will be denied access to the facility. All patrons are subject to search. All patrons refusing a search are free to leave the facility. In interest of the public safety, this facility may, in the sole discretion, institute and notify the public of a no bag policy. That came up as a discussion with the school district, as we know there are incidents, and again, you think about all the youth that come to a football game, a lot of teenagers associated with it, a lot of things happen at the school where maybe a kid was being disciplined for whatever reason and then shows up on park property. We're not aware of those instances, and sometimes I think that's the concern that we have is somebody may have an issue that took place during the school day, and then all of a sudden it carries into a Friday night a football game. What happens if that individual comes in with who knows what? We understand there's various access points. We can't control it all, but we're trying to minimize any time and increase safety for our patrons. So that's what we're here for you today, is to get approval of this bag policy. And then in addition, I just wanted to add, Morton County Emergency Services, we had met with them, I think it was last month. They're going to do an assessment of Raging Rivers and the Starting Sports Complex. We actually did the Starting Sports Complex in 2017 when we opened the facility. They did an assessment on how to provide safety, make sure we had all of our measures indoors and things of that nature to protect that facility. We haven't done it in 7 years, so we figured bring them back, see if there's other things that we need to address. And then obviously Raging Rivers, with the amount of youth that we get dropped off there that are not being supervised by parental supervision, how are we covering those instances so that if we do have some type of, unfortunately, kidnapping or a kid goes missing, we have things in place, but we would like that emergency service to kind of give us another assessment, see if we're doing a good job and where we can get better at. I will stand for any questions you may have.
I guess Attorney Ruff, if you had a chance to go through this, are we using somebody else's policy that you've seen around the state, or have you had a chance to look at this? I guess I had a couple questions on it.
No, I really haven't had a chance to review it yet.
Okay. I guess the word "we" in there, who is "we"? I would assume that to be Mandan Parks and Recreation.
Yes, I would assume so too.
So does that give the authority to the I guess our user groups to do that, or does it have to be Mandan Public or Mandan Parks District staff to determine that?
And I think tonight is the first presentation of this bag policy, so that's why I wanted to get
Okay.
your feedback. So if there's any direction, or if Attorney Ruff needs additional time to review, and we can definitely decide how we want to tweak it if needed. But I believe I can touch base with Dave Free tomorrow, but I think he just kind of took some of the good and the bad associated with all the policies and kind of combined them. But yeah, you're correct. We can definitely put any type of language and direction that you may have and bring it back for you next month if you would like.
You guys see any other questions, or just?
Not really any questions, but I think it's a good idea. I'm just not sure that I'm ready to move on it yet.
So right now, if we were to ask to search somebody's bag, Attorney Ruff, do we have the legal right to do so on our property? Okay. It'll be a little easier to do so. Okay.
And I guess if we had to talk about a timeline, is obviously we have the 4th of July rodeo coming up here right now. That was one of the concerns. Bismarck Mandan Stock Car Association is already doing that. They have the ability to do that, but it's their own internal policy. We lease the facility to them. So whatever policy we put in place or gets tweaked, we would like to make sure that's part of all of our lease agreements moving forward, so that it's built into there and that they sign it, and that if there is an incident that took place, we can revert back to that agreement and our policy, and it covers the park district. Obviously, this is going to cover us 100% liability, because obviously they're going to be able to attack whatever issue they would like to go after as far as financial contribution, but at least we have something in place.
So if you brought it back at the June meeting, that would be
Correct.
plenty of time. Okay.
The only thing I see with that particular option is that with the Raging Rivers opening up soon, within the next few weeks here, it would almost be like a switch in policy mid-term.
I would guess we'd have to put some signage up.
And we do have we have something similar there that we have We have the ability to search if we need to because coolers are not allowed, but we also know that there's young mothers who need to bring a cooler to keep things chilled, and so we do inspect already. We've done that for many years out there since we've actually opened in 2010. But it's not near the level of this where we understand they're going to bring towels and bags and extra miscellaneous for young children, where, again, this will be very similar common sense here. It may not even be implemented from the person who's leasing our facility, but from a park district standpoint, we just felt we needed to cover our
Sure.
liability.
Okay, we'll look at it again in June.
What do you guys do for the golf course?
Only large bags are allowed at the golf course. Gotta have a certain amount of clubs in them.
16? And I guess just to add, President Metzger and Commissioners, this does not have to do with people coming to play hockey or track or football. It's for the spectators.
More spectator, yeah. Okay, we'll look at it again in June. Okay, the second part of that item, FF&E items for the All Seasons Arena. We will table that.
So President Metzger and Commissioners, for the All Seasons Arena, as you know, the way it current operates, the Mandan Park District owns the building. It sits on school property. And as you know, we've been studying what that site will look like as the new high school is projected to be open this fall. And then potentially the way the agreement is operated today with the Mandan Public Schools is they staff it, and they will be moving staff out of there on August 1st of 24, this August. So that means by moving up to the new high school, we will now be responsible for staffing this facility. We have already hired Tom Krebs, who came on April 1. That was built into the 24 budget and approved. Now we're looking at trying to buy some FF&E items so that Dustin and his staff are able to provide. We weren't sure exactly what the school district would be taking with or not, and Dustin had met with Charlie and some of their staff up there and came up with a list of things that we're probably going to need. So we're requesting before you tonight is to amend the 24 budget in the amount of $24,000 to approve those items that are in your packet. And basically it's just FF&E items related to janitorial services and equipment needed to basically maintain the facility.
Okay, board's wishes.
I would move to approve the purchase of the FF&E items for the All Seasons Arena in the amount of $24,000 using the general fund reserves.
Motion by Commissioner Scott,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Melhoff. Any further discussion? Okay, Commissioner Mutter,
Aye.
Commissioner Freilich,
Aye.
Commissioner Melhoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott.
Aye.
Yes from me as well. Motion carries.
So President Metzger and Commissioners, just to add on to the All Seasons Arena, so Dave Free, obviously the facility manager, meeting with the athletic director, Mark Weiss, we mentioned earlier, sounds like there may be some timing issues related with the new high school and space needs. And so our agreement is through August with the joint powers agreement, how it's worked out. Then anything starting September 1, the opportunity as far as shared resources and the way it's been written is going to have to probably come back and get amended because we were basically prorating 2024 from January through the end of August. The way it's worked today is we each pay our fair share. We pay the utilities and the repairs of the building. They handle the staffing expenses and janitorial supplies. We net it out, and whoever paid more or less is basically writes a check 50% to basically be a net zero game. If we were to extend into September, October, November, and potentially into December, then we're going to have to look at amending our agreement with the school district and basically would be flipped. We are taking precautions with them, knowing that there are some construction timelines and hurdles that they have at the new high school that they may not be able to meet to be able to handle the fall sports. So we're working with them accordingly. So you will probably, I believe, Commissioner Freilich and is it Commissioner Mutter, you guys have the joint powers agreement, or you guys have that portfolio? So I do probably see some meeting here in the next 60 days. Let's let them get through school graduation, and sometime in June we will start having those conversations. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Cole. And then last portion of that item, consider for approval out-of-state travel for National Parks and Recreation Conference.
So President Metzger and Commissioners, each year we try to send staff to the National Parks and Rec Conference. This year it's in Atlanta, Georgia. We have enough dollars in there to send 3 people. Typically the director has gone along with 2 commissioners this year. Next year it is in Orlando. We talked about trying to get commissioners during their 4-year term to at least go one time to an NRPA conference. And so we had 3 people interested. Commissioner Mutter, who has not attended one, President Metzger, and then along with Commissioner Melhoff, had shared interest in that. So I will let you guys arm wrestle.
I sent a note to Cole. I don't know if he got it or not. That I was going to step out and I'll do the Orlando one. So just because I know Orlando.
Okay, knowing that, I know you said that, but we've scratched this from our budget in the past, haven't we?
Each year we put in an allotment for dollars, so
Yeah.
it definitely can be discussed at our July retreat for 25. We have a preliminary estimate what it takes each year to
So,
go.
I'll beg you guys to keep it in. No.
okay. No, I think, so your request is for two commissioners and you, right, Cole?
The way our handbook and policy states, any out-of-state travel requires board approval.
Right. Okay, board's wishes.
I move to approve out-of-state travel to the NRPA conference.
A motion by Commissioner Mutter,
Second.
second by Commissioner Scott. Any further discussion? Okay. Commissioner Scott,
Aye.
Commissioner Meloff,
Aye.
Commissioner Freilich,
Aye.
and Commissioner Mutter.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Item number 5, authorization to pay our monthly bills.
I'll make a motion to approve the monthly bills.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Meloff,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Freilich. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. All right, future meetings for Park Board Commissioners on May 13th, which was today. That one's in the past. We went and looked at the new park operations building. Did everybody make it out to that? I know I did not. I've seen it almost done. So, June, probably done. Is that kind of the... Well, anyway, this summer sometime it should be finishing up. And
We don't plan on moving until after the 4th of July.
Okay. So I guess if you want to go see it after that, Dustin or Cole will take you out there. And then future meeting here, we have an admin portfolio with the audit committee. We are being audited at this time. Some of you may have received an email from our, or will receive an email asking questions about financials. I know I did already, and sometimes they ask a couple commissioners. So remind us who the company is, Cole, who's doing our audit again?
Brady Mart's got it this year, Brady Mart's. And it has been completed. They were here in April, and so they're wrapping it up, and they'll have a preliminary for us to review prior to that June 10th meeting.
Okay. And then that's on earlier in the day on June 10th at 3:30, and then later that evening, our regular park board meeting will be here at City Hall at 5:30. Can you want any commissioner reports? Anything else, Cole?
I'm just going to defer to Attorney Ruff on the easement with Jan Foshey and John Gardner discussion as far as where we're at with that right now today. Even though the construction's been completed, we're just trying to get the documents signed, so I'll just defer to
I did
Attorney
draft
Ruff.
a sewer easement that was presented to Cole, and he presented it to Mr. Foshing and Mr. Gardner. They both contacted me and had some comments, some things that they're working through, and some questions that they had, which I would not answer for them or could not answer. They're in the process of taking a look at it, but they have not executed it yet.
I thought that was over and done with. Dustin, anything else? Okay. Attorney Ruff, anything else? Commissioner Mutter?
I just want to bring up, it was last week, we always talk about DCP and all that, but one day we had egg days out at DCP, and then we had the RC Park had their first league night out there, and then there's also soccer night out there. So it was good to see that place being used and seeing businesses being used at the same time. So I appreciate that.
Commissioner Freilich?
I've got nothing.
Commissioner Meloff?
No report.
Commissioner Scott?
No report.
All right, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Scott,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Freilich. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned.